Hi everyone. It is me, Flower Child, doing a sound check. Give me just a sec to make sure everything's coming through all right. I think it is. I think it is. Well, okay, so today is August, and that means that what is it? Today is August something or other. I don't know. It's just me, Flower Child 567, also Flower Kisma. And today's Thursday. And so this is the author narration Twitch stream right now. I've been narrating book 1 in the Faery-Chronicles, Faery With Teeth. And today we finished that book. So I began narrating it, reading it to you in ESO. And I thought it would only be fitting. It would be fitting to actually close it here in ESO. So that's where I am today. And I have my little Petals character logged on. She's my little level 4 character, Petals, and she's a sweet little wood elf. Anyways, I'm going to read with her today. This is one of my houses that I've never even developed, but it's pretty cool all its own without any additional stuff. So I thought this might be a fitting place to begin reading today. We're having a bit of a heat wave, so I have a fan going, and if you hear the wind ruffle through my mic, just know that it's my fan, and it's not going away because I need my fan. Anyways, I'm excited to read for you and to bring this volume of the Faery-Chronicles to a close. So I guess I'll just go down here and let's see, is there a good place to read and to give you a good view? It's a really interesting location. It's very doomsday-ish kind of, I think. But oh, here we go. Let's just have a seat right here. And you can pretend that you're having some of my grapes and all that good stuff, and I'll be moving the camera around, and ESO has a tendency to boot me because I'm stationary. So remember, if all of a sudden the Xbox spiral appears, it's because I've either been booted and I'll come right back in, or my controller has shut off. Anyways, this is the last day, and I'm beginning with that chapter, Last Day, on page 340. The sound of knocking interrupted Vivian's deep peace of sleep. She blinked her eyes open, closed them, and rolled onto her side. 3 knocks came again, followed by the hushed but urgent voice of Carla. "Vivian, wake up! Are you in there?" "Come in," Vivian croaked, clearing her throat. The door squeaked open, and a worried Carla slipped into the room. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore khaki pants and a navy sweater, which accentuated her growing belly. Carla studied Vivian, who had closed her eyes again and appeared to be asleep. She glanced suspiciously around the room, although nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and then she spotted the heap of clothing near the bathroom door, the extremely wrinkled skirt, the pieces of grass stuck to a sweater, and a wad of lace. Ignoring the carelessly discarded clothing, Carla moved to the bed and sat down on the edge of it. She gently shook Vivian. "What?" Vivian groaned, opened her eyes, and tried to focus on Carla's face. "I'm awake, really, I am. she stuttered. It just feels good to keep my eyes closed. I'm so tired. What time is it? It's already 8:30, Vivian. The annoyance evident in Carla's voice. Vivian sat up, grabbing for the travel clock on the nightstand. Oh my God, she stared at the face of the clock. I guess I forgot to set my alarm last night. You forgot to do a lot of things last night, Carla mumbled. She stood and went to the window. I did? Carla glared at Vivian. Yes, you did, she said, putting her hands on her hips. We were supposed to have a meeting last night to discuss how to handle today. Oh, Carla, I'm sorry, Vivian said, throwing back the covers and climbing out of bed. I was so tired. I actually fell asleep and didn't wake up until almost 11. She moved into the bathroom, scooping up the pile of clothes as she passed them. Carla slumped down into the chair near the window. She waited impatiently for the bathroom door to open. When it did and Vivian didn't emerge, Carla moved to the doorway and leaned against the door jamb. Vivian glanced up and smiled as she turned off the sink faucet and buried her face in a towel. What's wrong? Vivian asked. I haven't seen Keen all morning, she said. Oh? Vivian replied. She replaced the towel on the rack, then scooted past Carla. Have you seen Joe? Vivian asked. Yes, but he went to get gas. Maybe Kian went with him. I don't think so, said Carla, smirking. Joe and I ate breakfast together, and I walked outside with him, and I watched him leave. Donna wasn't at breakfast either. Well, have you checked the rooms to see if they're awake? Vivian asked. No, I came here first. Well, if I were you, I would have made sure Donna was up and reminded her to get down for breakfast before 9, and then I might have done the same thing with Kian. Vivian sat down on the bed, placed her hands between her knees, and looked at Carla. Then, she added, I would have checked on you to make sure you were awake. Tears rimmed Carla's eyes. Vivian, something's going on, and she wiped the tears. I feel like something's wrong between us. Listen, Carla, I know all about the poems, and Vivian paused and sighed. Kian told me everything. Didn't you think he would ask me about something like that? She raised her eyebrows in wonder and laughed. That was a pretty good story, Carla. It really was. I don't know why you did what you did. I know things have been crazy this pilgrimage, but I don't get it. Vivian went to Carla and knelt beside the chair. She took Carla's hands, a sympathetic smile on her face. It was wrong of you to do that. Carla nodded. Her chin trembled. She lowered her eyes. I don't hate you, and I'm not even mad at you, just disappointed. Vivian squeezed Carla's hand. Just stop, okay? Don't try anything else, please. I won't, Carla said, choking back a sob. I just got so angry with him and with you. The two of you have grown so close this trip. I felt left out. Carla nodded, suddenly feeling stupid. She fidgeted with the edge of her sweater. I know, she said sheepishly. Maybe it's the new hormones surging through my body. Vivian laughed. Must be the pregnancy, she joked. Carla rolled her eyes and slapped her own forehead. God, Vivian, I guess I'm really messed up. No, just crazy. Vivian raised her eyebrows, looking frankly at Carla. Let's just get through the rest of this pilgrimage and get home. Then we'll discuss what happened here and see where to go from there, okay? Carla nodded and let out a heavy sigh. I'll go check on Donna, she said, standing. Good, responded Vivian as Carla slipped out of the room. Kian and Claire stood in the hall and turned to Carla when she came out of Vivian's room. Oh, thank goodness, there you are, said Claire. Come quick. You've a call from the other B&B. Apparently, some people are sick. Yeah, Kian offered. Oh, no, Carla glanced over her shoulder at Vivian's door. Who's on the phone? Ellen, And she's been waiting for a few minutes, said Claire. I went to your room first and was coming up for Vivian when your man here came out of his room. Carla met Cian's eyes and nodded. This way, then, Claire said, heading down the stairs. You comin'? Carla asked Cian. Sure. Vivian found Carla and Cian in the dining room. Claire looked up as she put a plate of food on the table before Donna. There she is now. Did you get your beauty rest this morning, Vivian? Claire asked. Yes, I did. It was much needed, Vivian said, laughing. She glanced at the solemn faces of Carla and Cian, offering him a small smile before turning to Donna. Good morning, Donna. How are you? Well, after last evening, relatively good, she answered. That was quite an experience we had in the Grange. I was wondering if we'll be discussing it today. If there's time, Carla interrupted. We've had some bad news this morning, hissed Claire, turning to leave the room. She paused in the doorway. Vivian, will you be having some breakfast this morning? Oh, just coffee and toast, Claire, thank you. And would it be okay if I took it in the front room? I think we need to have a little meeting. Ah, certainly, dear. You three go in there. I'll bring coffee for all of you. In the front room, Carla switched off the television set and took a seat in an oversized armchair, leaving Cian and Vivian the sofa. Vivian sat down, but Cian remained standing until Vivian motioned for him to share the couch with her. I won't bite, she said. Carla bit down on her tongue and gasped as a sharp pain shot through her mouth. You okay? Cian asked. Like Claire, said Carla, who began ignoring his questions. I've some bad news. Okay, Vivian acknowledged. Let's have it. Apparently, Steve is deathly ill, said Cian. That's right. So ill that earlier Mrs. McEwen drove him and Marcella to the hospital, added Carla. What? Questioned Vivian in disbelief and swallowed hard. Are they still at the hospital? No, said Carla. They're back now. Claire came into the room carrying a tray. She sat it down on the ash table and arranged the mugs and other items on the table before them. Yes, John told me he couldn't keep down anything, interjected Claire, having overheard the conversation as she entered the room. I guess he was coming out both ends, she grimaced, and he was quite feverish. She wiped both hands on the yellow apron tied around her waist, surveyed her handiwork, then with a curt nod, turned, adding over her shoulder, If you need anything else, you just let me know. Vivian poured some cream in a blue mug, then lifted it to her lips and took a sip. Boy, do I need this, she said, smiling and taking another sip. Okay, well, that's not all the bad news, said Carla. I guess Ken had a full-blown anxiety attack. Ellen had to medicate him, and now he's out. What does that mean? Asked Vivian. Well, when he has to be medicated as heavily as Ellen had to this morning, apparently it knocks him out cold. She said he'll probably sleep for a solid 6 hours. Vivian cradled the hot mug in her hands and peered into the blonde liquid. She gave a heavy sigh and shook her head. I guess that changes our plans then. She looked to Carla and then Cian. I mean, we were supposed to go to Bridget'swell today, right? And dine at the castle tonight. Tomorrow, it's Dublin. We fly home. Claire said we can stay here again tonight if we need to, Cian. Yes, and Mrs. McEwen said the same thing before she got off the phone, said Carla. Just then the front door opened and Joe stepped into the foyer. A goofy grin broke his features. Look at the welcoming committee, he said, closing the door behind him. Ah, waiting for me, are ya? You shouldn't have. The grin left Joe's face as the seriousness in the room registered. He took a seat in a stiff-backed chair. "What?" he asked suspiciously, looking from face to face. "Did I do something wrong?" Carla told Joe the news. "So now what?" he asked. I think it's pretty clear," said Cian, glancing at Carla. "I mean, we can't bloody well go to Kildare without Steve or Ken." "Of course not," Carla assured him. "Maybe Joe could run me over to the other B&B and I could check everything out." "Yeah, sure," acknowledged Joe. "I'll stay there with you and bring you back." He looked at Vivian. "If that's okay with you." "Yes," agreed Vivian. "Carla, that's a great idea. In fact, why don't you take Donna with you and have her guide everyone in a meditation? Check with Mrs. McEwen if she can make lunch and dinner for the group today." She looked from Joe to Carla. I think you need to just keep them distracted. If I'm there, I'm afraid they're going to want to talk about what happened in the Grange, and I don't think that's a good idea right now." "Definitely not," stressed Cian. "Donna already asked if we were going to," Vivian reminded them. "So you can let everyone know that Cian and I have to work on the itinerary changes and we'll be over a bit later this morning." "That sounds good," said Carla, standing. She looked at Joe. "You ready?" "At your service, madam," he said, then turned to Vivian, a mischievous grin on his face. "So, Vivian," he said, "what did happen at the Grange?" "You git," admonished Cian, shaking his head, no hint of playfulness to his words. "Joe!" Carla grabbed his arm in exasperation and led him from the room, shaking her head at Vivian and Cian. "I'll talk to you soon," she said. Everyone froze when the telephone rang. "Vivian, dear," called Claire from the kitchen. "Marcella is on the phone and would like to speak with you." Marcel reported to Vivian that Steve's condition had stabilized. He was resting well, but that Ken was still out cold. "Some people seem really withdrawn," she had said. "Shelby even said she'd be okay if we flew home today. When are you coming?" We're on our way, Marcella," said Vivian, not giving a second thought to the other plans she and her business associates had just agreed to. "Thank you. I think we really need you over here." Vivian hung up the phone and went back to the front room. "Well," she said, looking from face to face, "we all need to get over there. I'd say they're having a bit of a crisis this morning, and we need to help them." She looked at Cian. "Are you willing to go?" "Of course," he said, surprised. "Thank you. Let's all get ready. We'll probably be over there the biggest part of the day." In a flurry of activity, the small group gathered what belongings they would need for the day, piled into the bus, and headed back to Loch Gur, to the B&B located only a couple of 100 yards from the Grange. As the bus passed the stone circle, Vivian refused to look. For the first time, Cian let down his guard and offered her a smile. Carla and Donna gawked at the stones, noticing a large flock of ravens near the Renacrom Dove. "Look at them," Donna said. It's as if they're feeding on something." This comment caused Vivian and Cian to look, but it was too late. The bus had already passed the megalithic site, now obscured behind a line of ash trees. The pilgrims were comforted by Vivian's arrival. They gathered in a large sitting room where she invited each person to share about their personal life, hopes and dreams and plans for the future, avoiding any discussion of the Grange. Eventually the tension eased and soon Joe began telling jokes, at which all laughed. Each member of the group did her or his best to ignore the shadow hanging over them. The morning hours passed. Vivian and Cian sat across from one another, avoiding each other's eyes, a taut cord between them. Kat was sharing a dream she had had the night before. It was a wild dream," said Kat. "I was in a magnificent palace, and there were beautiful light beings dancing around. socializing, eating, laughing, like at a ball or something. She paused and looked around the group. Then I swear, Vivian, she said and looked at Vivian, you waltz into the room, and at your side is a godlike chieftain who kind of looked like you, Kian, but with blonde hair and blue eyes and a full beard. Anyway, the two move into the center of the gathering and make love. I mean, they have great sex from the looks of it, and all the beautiful light beings in the room stop whatever it is they are doing and form a circle around the two. Oh my God, said Rose. I had a crazy dream last night too, but didn't remember it until just now. But I was in a forest and saw the fairy king and queen making love. My dream was inside Loch Crew Carn. All eyes focused on Mark. Although I couldn't see who the two fairy were, I just knew they were fairy, he added. During Cat, Rose, and Mark's report, Vivian froze, forcing herself not to look at Kian until she heard his voice. I stood on the fairy mound at back of our B&B, Kian said, looking to Vivian, who gasped. Silence permeated the room. Where did your dream take place? Cat asked Vivian. And when Vivian didn't reply, she asked more directly, Vivian! A second time, where did your dream take place? What? Asked Vivian. Obviously, you had the same dream, said Cat. No, I didn't actually have the same dream. Her eyes went to Kian's face. He held her gaze, slightly nodding his head repeatedly. Anyone else have the same dream? Rose asked, taking the attention off Vivian. Shelby, Carla, how about you, Marcella and Ellen? Shelby shook her head and wrapped her arms around herself. No, I slept like the dead, said Carla. I was too busy with Steve, said Marcella, adding, but I wish I'd had that dream. Sounds like my kind of dream. All eyes turned to Ellen, who blushed. Obviously, she had it too, stated Rose. Well, to be precise, mine wasn't a dream. I mean, I am here with my husband, said Ellen. Her insinuation brought a round of hoots from several of the pilgrims. Okay, you actually got laid, said Cat. If that's what you'd like to call it, sniffed Ellen. Hey, what about you, Joe? Asked Rose. You have a sex dream? I wish I did, he said, twinkling eyes, but I don't remember me dreams. Dream or no dream, Vivian felt the color drain from her face as she listened to the discussion. Once she met Kian's stare, she could not bring herself to look away. He knew. Oh, yeah, somehow he knew. He had had the same dream as she had had. And the fact that Kat named both of them as key players in her own dream unnerved Vivian. All the confidence she had felt upon waking at the mound vanished. Uncertainty began to seep down around her thoughts. Vivian unconsciously played with the pewter bracelet hanging around her left wrist, twirling it, tracing the spiral imprints with her fingertips, pulling it against her skin as if it were a hook and she was a fish caught unaware. What happened last night could not have really happened, she told herself, refusing to accept any other thought. See the reality of the other world, how it confuses your mortal mind? It seemed the thought came from outside herself, but Vivian embraced it as her own. This was exactly the delusional state the fairy created, and once again she was battling against reality and non-reality. There was no doubt in Vivian's mind that she had been taken into the other world last night. The fairy mound had opened, and two beings, an ally and a guide, appeared and took her into the fairy realm. Vivian had no doubt about this. Again, she had fallen asleep on a fairy mound, but this time woke up remembering what had transpired. But she had communed with McColl, a fairy, and not Kian. God, wasn't that right? I mean, As she sat there staring at Keen, she was really no longer sure. If he had had the same dream, then was it possible he really had come back to the mound? Were you in bed when you had your dream? Vivian asked out loud, oblivious to the silence her sudden and queer question caused. That's where one normally has dreams at night, he had responded. I mean, that's where you woke up. Vivian's question brought laughter and a flurry of comments. And where else would he wake up? Asked Joe. Out on the mound? Vivian whipped her head toward Joe, her eyes not really focusing on him, her movement caused by the shock of his words, the truth behind them. Yes, Vivian, said Kian, his words soft and steady. And you? However, the entrance of Mrs. McEwen, who entered the room carrying a large tray piled high with sandwiches and chips and fruit, swallowed Kian's question. While the pilgrims gathered around the food, Kian and Vivian remained in their seats, brown eyes glued to green ones, an unspoken knowing passing between them. And by the time everyone got some food and began eating, the tension had eased between them enough so they could get up and go to the tray. Are you okay? Kian asked Vivian. Fine, considering everything that's happened in the last 24 hours, she said. I'm fine. The group ate in silence until Rose coughed into her hand and scooted to the edge of her seat. So, we don't get to go to bridge as well? She asked after getting up the courage. No, I'm sorry. We won't be able to now, Vivian apologized sympathetically. I understand, Rose said, frowning. It's just that I had really been looking forward to that. Don't you usually do a purification ceremony and priestess ordination there? Yes, answered Vivian. Her eyes met Carla's. Maybe you could hold up Bridget's ordination out in the garden, asked Carla. That would certainly fill in the afternoon nicely. Oh, yes, responded Kat and Marcella. Can you do a priest ordination too? Asked Mark hopeful. Please, yes. Say yes, Vivian, pretty please, whined Rose, making a steeple with her hands and bowing her head. Sure we can, said Kian. Okay, get bundled up, said Vivian. It's chilly outside today. I'll meet you all in the garden. The room became an excitement of activity as the pilgrims went to retrieve jackets and other items from the rooms. This was just the distraction they needed. This was the remedy for the horror and confusion each person had been feeling only hours before. Carla and Donna slipped on their jackets and moved into the foyer in animated discussion. Joe carried the empty food tray into the kitchen. Kian and Vivian sat alone. Kian rose and moved to Vivian, squatting next to her chair. He checked to see if anyone was watching before he took her hand. They need the distraction, he said, and so do we. Look, I'm sorry about last night. Me too, said Vivian. Maybe before this day is over we can talk. This morning I thought we might be lucky to have some time to do just that, she said. No, love. His words came softly. Kian shook his head and gently, slowly returned Vivian's hand to her lap. Our time was... He trailed off, not finishing the sentence. Laughter spilled from the foyer. Joe tickled Rose. She squealed with glee and counterattacked. It's their time now. Kian pressed his lips together, attempting to smile, but found it difficult to do so. That's why we're here, remember? He stood looking down at Vivian. It's time to give them their last day. It's time to bring this pilgrimage to as smooth and peaceful a closure as possible. Cian offered Vivian his hand. She took it and came to her feet. They walked out to the garden, arm in arm, as they normally did when taking on the role of priest and priestess, and turned to face the small group gathered. Ellen chose to remain in the room in case Cian woke, but Steve had roused long enough to sit a cup of warm chicken broth before falling back asleep, and so Marcella was able to join in the last ceremony of the pilgrimage. That morning, Mark had taken Shelby under his wing, hoping to ease her discomfort while finding some of his own peace of mind. The two stood together holding hands. Kat had a new look in her eyes and continually glanced at Vivian, waiting for the right moment to share a hidden secret with her. Rose stood next to Jo, where they continued their playfulness. Carla stood with Donna, feeling better than she had in days, hopeful that she hadn't ruined everything with Vivian. We come to the end of our pilgrimage, this last day of our sacred pilgrimage in Ireland. Vivian spoke softly, a tired smile on her face. She looked from face to face, so very aware that she stood where she did because of them. Thank you, she said directly to each person, looking at Cian last. And you wanker, she teased, trying hard to ease the discomfort that still whispered between them. Thank you. Cian pantomimed a top hat bow to Vivian. Without thinking, Vivian wrapped her arms around Cian and hugged him. Automatically, Cian's arms engulfed Vivian. Everyone laughed, adoring the display of affection. Somewhere along the way, each pilgrim had had thoughts about Vivian and Cian, the roles the two played in the pilgrimage. Each person had wondered if the two were in love, thinking that it would be natural if they were, almost hoping they were. Ireland was, after all, the land of dreams and fantasy. It was easy to believe that Vivian and Cian were a couple because that supported the drama even more, gave the illusion that they embodied the essence of the Fairy King and Fairy Queen. And as the group looked on, witnessing the exuberance between the tour's leaders, each person fell instantly in love with both Vivian and Cian as a couple. Ah, give her a kiss, man, Jo teased. Yes, agreed Rose enthusiastically. Become the Fairy King and Fairy Queen for us, Shelby urged wistfully. Go ahead, encouraged Carla. Kiss, 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 Jo began chanting. When Rose and Kat joined in, the others did too. All right, stop it, Cian said, laughing and raising his hand, a red glow rising in his cheeks. Suddenly he turned to Vivian, encircling her waist with one arm, pulled her to him. Vivian's eyes grew wide, and she laughed, automatically bringing her hands up to rest on his chest. Me, Fairy King, Cian grunted playfully. You, Fairy Queen. We kiss. We kiss. Faery-Chronicle entry 2.888.1. Not waiting for Vivian's reply, Cian covered her mouth with his sighs. Silence shrouded the garden as all eyes filled with the scene. Benign smiles, curved lips, eyes took on a dreamy mist. Nobody noticed the shimmering essence that illuminated the couple, or how long their kiss lasted, or that Vivian and Cian lost themselves in each other and stood gazing into each other's eyes in wonder, as if alone, sharing a private moment. What mattered to the onlookers was the enchantment of a secret fantasy, the unfolding drama that solidified the magic of our land, the passion of the fairy each mortal held on to inside. All that mattered was that each of them felt as if he or she was a witness to the pronouncement of a spiritual love. And Vivian was indeed receiving the fulfillment of blessing that she had asked of Anya. Although Cian was not aware of his part in awakening the sleeper McCool, he was aware of the deep emotion he still held for Vivian, sensing that this would be one of their last times together. Cian opened himself to the sweetness of the moment, received my glamour, and was naturally included in the inculcation of Anya's blessing on Vivian. A cheer erupted when Cian released Vivian, and she staggered back as if drunk from the kiss. This made Cian grin and bow to her again. But when Cian straightened and looked on Vivian's face, a sorrow showed, an inner knowing, a hostile reality that their love, although supported, was impossible. It was denied. Cian swallowed hard, reached for Vivian's hand, and gently pulled her next to him. As Fairy King and Fairy Queen, Cian began, we call forth those of you who hear the invitation within your heart to become a priest or priestess of our goddess Bridget. And for the remainder of the afternoon, the pilgrims swarmed around Vivian and Cian. It seemed no one would let them out of sight, as if they were greedy to spend the last of their time with the couple. As the last day of the pilgrimage drew to a close, tears were shared and heartfelt gratitude, and when everyone at last sat in silence, when there was nothing further to say, Vivian stood and gave Joe a nod of her head. "It's time for us to take our leave," she announced. "We'll be back here in the morning to pick you up at 7, okay? Please have your bags in the foyer so Joe and Cian can get them loaded on the bus. Be ready to go, and make sure you have your passports and airline tickets handy." Heads nodded. Each pilgrim wore a solemn expression. Vivian, Cian, Joe, Carla, and Donna moved outside. The starry black sky washed over them. Silently, each climbed into the bus and took a seat. Joe started the engine and backed the bus effortlessly out of the driveway onto the 2-lane road. The short drive to the farmhouse was made in silence. The pilgrimage had officially come to an end. Well, that was our first chapter for today. And we still have, I believe, one more or two more that I'm going to read. But I'm going to take us to another location here. I'm going to take us out. And I'm looking to see if there were any comments or questions, and it's okay if there isn't. All right, well, this is a good place to stand. All right, I'm going to continue. On page 355. Wake up, sleepyhead. I'm not some white knight carrying bright colors riding on that white stallion. I'm more a black knight, but I chose my loyalties. I've made you a vow, Vivian, and I keep my word, love, I do. Cian grabbed Vivian's arm and forced her to stop. He held her arm in the air, feeling angry, hurting badly. They stood in the empty horse corral in the dark, her tears caught in the muted moonlight, briefly sparkling on her cheeks. Bullocks, but isn't our love star-crossed? Cian motioned to the sky. It's ill-fated, and that reality is driving a stake in my heart. Let's show them we can rise above love. The world caught in his throat, forcing him to swallow and cough. Vivian pulled her arm from his clutch and turned, facing the hedge, her back to Cian. This was impossible. She felt him move up behind her, his arms draw her to him, the warmth of his body, his beard against her neck. She closed her eyes, surrendering to his embrace, and rested her head back against him. Ours will be known as a sacred love, a love of all loves, she whispered. Kian bit down on his lip. God, how he wanted to rise above the human emotion that was stinging him raw. But what Vivian was asking him to do was more than he was capable of doing. Kian wanted to agree with Vivian, wanted to turn and face her, tell her that he could conquer the human desire, the deep emotion that welled up inside and threatened to spill from his eyes into the night. It had been a long time since Kian had wanted to cry. Yes, Vivian, yes, he desperately wanted to assure her. I will find a way to squelch the feelings, even though he had no idea how he'd do it, but he would. Somehow he would. And yes, Vivian, yes, I will label our love and put it back in a tiny compartment classified not for use, and somehow go on about my life as if nothing had ever happened. But the blackness crashed down around his mind so fast as he felt himself go crazy. Kian, Vivian cooed, we can do this. The insistence in her words almost sounded persuasive. The truth was, neither of them could handle the depth of their love, the heaviness of it. Vivian was just as desperately trying to deny its magnitude. Ah, sweet Jesus, Vivian! Kian stepped away from her, frantically searching for his cigarette tin. Finding it, he carelessly popped it open and spilled the contents on the ground. Bullocks, he swore, and bent to retrieve the items. If I'd known you would really come, I'd never have married or never gone ahead with the baby. He slammed a fist in the earth. Bullocks, Vivian, I didn't know you would really come. Vivian turned to witness Kian's torment, his helplessness. The outline of his body, the silhouette of his face in the darkness became a still life portrait. With it came the comprehension that it was all she would have to gaze upon in a short while, when the days had slipped by and all she had were the memories to live off of. But then she supposed that's all he would have too, along with the numbness that she suspected would eventually come, and it was this certainty that suddenly gave her comfort. After all, they both had known this last night would come. They also knew what the morning would bring, though neither of them was prepared to look that far ahead. She watched the match flare, its temporary light illuminating Kian's face, mellowing into the red glow as he drew the flame to the end of the cigarette. All the things she disliked about him, she would come to adore in his absence: the smoking, the long nails, the way he absently sucked at his teeth after eating, the same things she would have grown to hate had they been allowed to stay together. The gods don't play fair, Kian said, picking a piece of tobacco from his lip. His eyes bit into her, angry and sad. He made an angry face. They don't have human emotion, you know. They don't care what kind of pain they cause us. He took another drag, blowing out the smoke in a rush. They probably find our pain humorous, the blimey bastards. He spit. Vivian took a tentative step toward Kian, her head tilting to one side. It's the hazel staff, she said absently. What? I kept thinking something was missing, and I realized it's your staff. He held the cigarette in the corner of his mouth, letting it dangle there, and shook his head, a cocky expression changing his features. Have you been listening to a word I've said? He asked. Yes. Vivian sighed, looking down thoughtfully. But it's the little things I'll remember and dwell on. Her smile turned into a frown. We didn't get to Bridget's. She raised her eyes to look at him. Tomorrow, maybe I'll just go there. Not get on that plane and just go there. She gave a laugh, then grew serious. I adore you, Kian, and Ireland will never be the same for me. I'm standing here already planning how soon I can get back. I don't know what reason to use to entice another group of people to sign up. I always had a mission, Kian, but I failed it. You're wrong, Vivian. You still We, he stressed, still have a mission. Your work isn't done over here yet. You still need to bring people back to their hearts, to the heart of this land, and you still need to help create the balance between the god and goddess. And now we have to stay the powers that block her from spreading. Those are all missions. That all seems so meaningless now, so secondary. Well then, our work is wrong, he spat, spitting the taste of nicotine out of his mouth and flicking the butt away. Well, why are you saying that? She questioned, stepping closer, the pain showing in her eyes. Because if you've lost the reason behind the pilgrimages, then you've diminished our work together. She laid her hand on his face. Time was running out. Their time. I know our love is supposed to be beyond mundane, Kian said, confessing, his eyes pleading with her. I know it's supposed to be a spiritual love. Shh, Vivian whispered, laying her finger over her lips, hushing him. And as she did so, she heard the otherworld voice as clearly as his, as if Onya was standing beside her. That's what you asked for, Banba. That's what I blessed you with. Spiritual love. Vivian whirled around. What's wrong? Kian asked, searching the darkness. You didn't hear that? No. She swallowed and nodded to Onya in acceptance, slipping the pewter bracelet from her left wrist and placing it into Kian's hands. You're right, Kian, she agreed. Ours is a spiritual love, a blessing from Onya. Let this bracelet, my Ireland bracelet, serve as a reminder of our spiritual love, our work together. I place it into your keeping. Bury it somewhere in your forest, and when you need me, visit it, and I'll feel you and know that all is well. Vivian leaned her head against his chest and closed her eyes. Kian held Vivian close to him, smoothing down the back of her hair, rubbing his chin against the top of her head, accepting their destiny. Neither of them had made an offer to leave their respective lives, nor insisted the other do so, yet he knew he would if she did it with him. It wouldn't last, Vivian said, as if having read his thoughts. Her sigh lifted around them, and her body trembled against his. The soft, muted sounds of her crying filled the night. Wake up, sleepyhead, wake up, she whispered into Kian's shoulder, just as McCool had done with her. What? Asked Kian. He pulled back his head to look into Vivian's eyes, but she only shook her head and sighed, feeling confused and terribly sad. Kian tightened his arms around Vivian and buried his face into the side of her neck. He had to accept what he didn't want to accept, for he knew that as strong as he felt in his commitments, Vivian was equally committed and stood behind her words. He knew all too well that she loved her husband and her son. She felt a strong need to return to them, and he felt certain that Vivian was stronger than he was, had not felt the same magnitude of emotion that he felt for her. This realization gave him cause for regret, made him wish that he'd never allowed himself to act like such a fool. He slid her bracelet into a coat pocket, wondering if he would be able to continue his work with Vivian. Finding no answer in the star-studded night, he kissed the top of her head and let her go. Come on, love, he said. There's nothing more for us here tonight. Let's get some sleep. We have an early morning. Vivian lifted her face to Kian, her green eyes red-rimmed and sorrowful. How will I ever survive this? Ah, the same way I will, love. The same way I will. Well, we have one more to read. I have a visitor here. Isn't that interesting? Who's here? Let's see. I don't know who that is. Let's see who it is. But I can't. I don't know who it is. Who is it? Contra. Okay, hi, Contra. I don't know why I'm standing like I'm standing. So I'm going to go back in because I don't know what's going on. I'm outside. That's what it is. That was another player in ESO. This is fitting. It's very fitting to have someone standing right here by me. All right, here we are. And I'm ready to read the final chapter. I think it's the final chapter. Page 360. It is a final decision. Faery-Chronicles entry 2.999.1. The pre-dawn sky lay charcoal against the land. A thin sliver of rose ran across the edge of the horizon like a wound, raw pink flesh exposed in putrid, rotting skin. It was a reflection of Vivian and Cian's hearts. It was a sky to match the sorrow that shrouded the mortal couple as they stood on the sidewalk outside the Dublin airport terminal. They were the sorrowful picture of all couples in Barton. He held her hand in his against his chest, his body rigid and tense, her hand limp in his, her body slumped and caving in upon itself. Their eyes locked until the final moments of each other's face. The other pilgrims moved inside to stand in line at the baggage check-in counter. They had said their goodbyes to both Cian and Joe, and not even Carla could stand to watch this last episode of the pilgrimage. Even Joe had gone back to the bus, parked at the curb, and climbed behind the steering wheel to wait for Cian. He faced forward, feeling a sad and forlorn mood coming on. Although their mortal love was not to be allowed, both were caught in the residue of its existence. Too much had transpired between them this pilgrimage to pretend that nothing had happened. I knew that our meddling had not helped that matter. Fairy love is a powerful glamour when woven between two mortals. Both of them would, indeed, undergo a measure of withdrawal, just as if they were addicts undergoing recovery. Sickness and deep sorrow would plague both their hearts and bodies, and my only regret was that I had aided in their attrition. "Don't hate me," Vivian said, choking on sadness. Cian's face reddened with emotion. Tears filled his eyes as he watched Vivian's battle as the raw power of emotion took her under its crashing waves, and the tears slipped down her face in an endless stream. He tried to lighten the mood. "Now, Vivian, don't go getting all emotional on me," he said, attempting a smile, but his words only made her weep all the more. Vivian shook her head, fighting to survive the awkward moment. She hadn't planned to be so weak. She had planned to be strong and smile and say goodbye, see you soon. They slipped into each other's arms, both feeling helpless. Cian wiped away his own tears, worried that any show of weakness on his part would only be more of a burden to Vivian. "We'll be together again soon," he said, and felt her head nod. Then, before he realized what had happened, Vivian lifted up on her toes, kissed his lips, and walked away. Cian stared, open-mouthed, fighting back the urge to run after Vivian, somehow managing to choke out "Goodbye" before she moved through the sliding doors and was gone. With head hung low, he turned and went to the bus, silently climbing inside. "We're off then, are we?" asked Joe, peeking at Cian in the seat behind him. "Right." Joe shoved the gear into drive and guided the bus away. Neither of the men looked to see if they could spot anyone in the windows. Both kept their faces rigidly held forward. "Worse than any other is dispartin'," mumbled Joe. Cian stared at the back of Joe's head, mulling the words over, then gave a grunt, slouched back in the seat, and closed his eyes against the tears. Eventually, Vivian and Carla waved goodbye to each pilgrim as he or she boarded a plane. and before long the two women found themselves alone, waiting for their own departure. The terminal was still quiet. The busy morning traffic hadn't yet begun. They sat quietly in an empty waiting area. Vivian looked out the window at a green and white Aer Lingus plane, noticing the moody gray sky above it. She focused on the reflection of her eyes in the window glass. And he was there, the face of Lou, and the golden other country. Yet she pushed the image aside. Why? Vivian silently questioned some greater force. God, goddess, fairy, whoever is in control. How can I go home with all this battling inside me? How can I go home and pretend that nothing happened, that all is normal? How can I go back home and have a normal life? No answers came, and Vivian accepted the silence, resigning herself to the journey ahead. She continued to stare mutely outside the window, feeling the unclean. Carla laid her hand on Vivian's shoulder. This brought Vivian's face from the window. "Do you need to talk?" Carla asked. Tears filled Vivian's eyes. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall and hit against the window. "Love," Vivian could barely say. "The fairy want you back," Carla said, reaching out and caressing the side of Vivian's face. "They've always wanted you, and they know exactly how to get you." Faery-Chronicle entry 2.999.2. Yes. Even in the adversity of evil, love would lure Vivian back to Ireland. Maka knew the wiles of women and just how to manipulate this one best. One may see and yet deny, as one may see in the nocturnal wave a flame that is not there, or a star caught momentarily in the travelling hollow, and know that there is no flame, but only a sudden gleam of infinitesimal congregated life, no star, but only a wandering image, but also one may deny that which is not phantasmal. He who is colorblind to that infinite flame of life which creates the blue mist of youth and love and romance cannot discern in youth or love or romance the names of those primitive ecstasies that in themselves are immortal, things though we only see their fruitions and decays, and he whose soul is obscure or whose spirit is blind cannot see those things which pertain to the spirit, or understand those things wherein the spirit expresses itself. Vivian had read those words one summer day as she sat in her garden. She'd closed her eyes and the book, marking the page with her finger, and dreamt of finding such spiritual love. Then it had been a hint of honeysuckle on the light breeze. Now it was as pungent and invasive as a whore lathered with bad eau de toilette cologne, musk-based. And when the thought came, at first Vivian ignored it, dismissing it as an impossibility, but it pestered her as if it were a sore splinter. I watched, proud that it was not of mine or any of the host's doing, but of her own impulse, to continue to serve Maka's cause and continue her own immortal awakening. It was Vivian's own need to become purified, cleansed of all the wrong emotions she felt she carried, which allowed the thought to be embraced and become the right thing to do. "Carla," Vivian said, her eyes suddenly hopeful, "I'm not getting on that plane with you." "What?" Carla straightened. "I need to stay here for a few more days. I need to take care of some business." "Oh, God, Vivian," Carla gasped. "What on earth will I tell Justin?" "That he must endure my absence for a few more days. That I must do this." She searched the air for the right words. "Tell him that I hold his love in my hand, that I must be purified to return to him, that I seek a fairy blessing to put our love back in my heart. I don't think I can do that, said Carla. Vivian gathered her few belongings and stood. You have to do it for me. She squatted at Carla's feet. Please. Carla wrung her hands together, eyes wide and frantic. I'll be on a flight home by the end of the week, I promise. And with those words, Vivian rose and walked away. Another tale. Faery Chronicle entry 3.111.3. A light rain sprinkled. The drops glittered, the pearl drops on grass and leaf. As an occasional drop hit the shallow water in the circular granite well, it made a plopping noise. Vivian stood on a slab at the open end to Bridget's well and watched the concentric circles ripple across the surface of the dark water. She stood that way for a while, staring at the water, thinking and replaying the pilgrimage over and over in her mind. Vivian knew full well that her actions would devastate her husband, but accepted that her plane had departed hours ago and that the flight she had been rescheduled on didn't depart for another 2 days. What she'd do with those 2 days, she didn't have a clue. All that mattered was she had made it to the holy well and had performed a purification ritual by washing in the water, confessing all her transgressions and finding absolution in the peaceful stillness of the sanctuary. Actions speak louder than words, Vivian said out loud, breaking the thick silence of the rain. She held her wooden band and looked down at the simple ring of gold that lay cupped in her palm. It meant so many different things to her now. She picked it up and held it before her eyes. Closing one, she peered through the center of the circle as if it were a telescope or a magic window. What she looked for was beyond her own understanding, perhaps the essence of her marriage, of her husband, or the epitome of who she was. Vivian looked through the ring at the sky, at the shimmering leaves on the beech trees, at the swirling water in the stream that fed the holy well. She looked through the golden band across the field that was filled with knee-high green weeds and caught sight of her own past, of the essence and spirit of Bonba. I am Bonba, I know that now, she whispered, but I am also Vivian. She sat boldly, not willing to relinquish her mortal soul. I will serve you as both, but do not continue to ask of me acts of betrayal on those I love dearly in this my mortal life. Vivian lowered the ring and looked at it, a smile spreading across her face, and for the first time in days she felt free, liberated, lightened of a heavy burden. She curled her fingers around the band and brought her hand to her heart. Lifting her chin to the sky, she studied the clouds, wondering if she'd imagined everything, and not allowing herself to enter back into that mental battle. Vivian took a deep breath and let it out with force. I am ready to continue my fairy work as Bonba, as Vivian, a woman of 2 worlds. The chatter of songbirds erupted her declaration, but before she knew that it was a sign that we fairy had heard and had accepted her offer, she relaxed and very carefully placed the gold wedding band back on her left ring finger. I knew you'd come here, his voice wafted through the air. Vivian swung around, her heart pounding wildly, her countenance shifting as she saw him. He stood near the winding brook, between a granite stone said to be St. Bridget's shoes and the white fence enclosure surrounding the holy well. He stood under a hazel tree, a warm smile on his face. Overhead, the sun had been struggling to break through the gray, fluffy clouds, and it finally won. A bold ray sliced through, casting a golden hue across the holy well. The rain stopped. A huge double rainbow arched over the fertile green patchwork landscape. The host gave a sigh of relief as we turned to watch Maka's reaction to the materialization. Her lips together. Her gray eyes twinkled. Maka gave a rare smile. She then nodded her head in satisfaction as the beloveds came together in an embrace. I knew then that there was still hope against the evil, and that Bonva's work was germane to our cause, and was, indeed, just beginning. The end. So there you have it, my friends. There you have it. That is Book 1, Faery with Teeth of the Faery-Chronicles. And I just want to share the acknowledgements because really a book of this type is not possible without thanking a multitude of individuals who lent their own experiences and advice, knowledge, guidance, and expertise. First and foremost, I give the most honor to my husband, Jack, who has tolerated all my travels to Ireland, being away from both him and our son for weeks on end, as well as the hours spent banging away at the keyboard instead of fixing dinner as I should, or... I would like to thank my editor and dear friend, Caradwin She-Wolf, for lending an eagle's eye to the manuscript, making protective suggestions, and just for being my sounding board over the last 5 years. There was a new group of women writers that I belonged to whom I also give thanks, the Rainbow Council Writers Group. Many of the ladies read bits and parts of the manuscript, and several were willing to see more than others. Their comments and encouragement was greatly appreciated. And needless to say, one of the most helpful and invaluable sources on Irish fairy lore and history have been the Irish themselves. And I give thanks to the late Tom McNamara, the traditional Shawnee of Lochgur, who befriended me and shared even more than I could have hoped. Tom Mac, wherever you are now in the other world, I am so honored that you made one of my personal fairy experiences at Knockanya part of your storytelling repertoire. Thanks also to the Irish historian Michael Quinlan, the Brigidines of Solus Breed in Kildare, Senior Mary Minahan, my mentor, the Right Reverend Olivia Robertson of the Fellowship of Isis Inniscorthy, the proprietor of Tara Hill, Michael McGuire, the key keeper Basil, for always giving me the key for the Loch Crew Cairns before access became controlled by Bord Falcha, 2 traveling colleens, Debbie and Rachel, who originally escorted me around the Irish countryside on my first visit in 1994, and the 2 lads who once upon a time worked with me in Ireland. Thank you all very, very much. And to the nameless individuals who have shared their own personal experiences with me, I also give thanks. You know who you are. Finally, overwhelming gratitude is due Onya for blessing me and Jack with a star child, our little Fae, Tristan Shane. That part of the story is very true. And now in closing, I'll be taking a week or 2 break, and then I will return and begin narrating Book 2 of the Faery-Chronicles, Oceans of Time.